This is so hilariously wrong in every detail. It makes that prologue to Bram Stoker's Dracula look like a historical text in comparison. Alright, everybody, hello and welcome to episode 8, I believe, of the Screenplay Archaeology podcast. I'm your host, Pyramid Head.
And I am guest appearing again, Deusdaecon, from YouTube.
And tonight we are discussing a video game adaptation. This is the second one I've discussed on this show. The first one was Resident Evil way back in episode 3, which this episode will kind of cross over with that in a weird, bizarre way. Because this Castlevania adaptation was written by Paul W.S. Anderson.
Yes, of the Resident Evil butcherer.
And AVP, if you count that as a video game movie.
Yeah, you could.
You very well could. And this script, because I've gotten crap from a guy who's been listening to my episode saying I don't summarize the scripts well enough at the beginning. This script, the basic premise of it is that, you know, outside of a brief intro in World War II, it takes place in 1576. Let me check my notes. 1576, and it features, you know, these two Romanian knights, which I'll get to why that is stupid later on, named Simon and Christopher, because it needs to sound foreign, Belmont, who are leading, you know, basically a small army to protect this mountain village from the Turks. And there's so much wrong with that sentence. And they pick up this gypsy girl named Orica, which I'm pretty sure that's a made-up name. And they decide they're going to occupy this castle that they didn't even know about. And it turns out that it's Dracula's castle, and they have their encounters with him, and Orica is none so subtly implied to be the reincarnation of his dead wife, because we can't have a Dracula where his backstory doesn't involve him being stupid and emo over a dead wife.
Apparently.
Yep. And that's basically it. They eventually figure out that Dracula is not what he appears to be, and vampires and shit.
Pretty much. It's fairly bare bones when you look at it.
Yes, it is. It's basically just a handful of action scenes and exposition strung together.
Yeah.
And this script, I guess before we get into, you know, the nitty-gritty of this script, let's talk about, you know, Castlevania. I'll go over my background with Castlevania because it's actually pretty short. I have played a fair bit of Symphony of the Night. Well, I'm at 30-something% according to the save counter. And I've gotten I'm on a really tough area right now, so I haven't really gotten too far into it, but I also know a fair basic amount of the lore around the series, so knowing just the bare bones amount of what the series is about, I knew the script was bullshit just by reading it. And I've also played pretty much the first 3 stages of Super Castlevania 4 on an emulator, but I keep fucking up in that because I can't control that shit with a keyboard worth a damn. So I just keep dying, and I keep losing my special weapon, so I keep getting killed by the boss. And I'm terrible at platforming even on a good day. So yeah, but I do think it is a fun game, and I do like, you know, the multi-directional whipping. So I do know that the basics of Castlevania are you're a Belmont, or in most of them you're a Belmont, and you have the chain whip vampire killer, which you're supposed to kill Dracula with it, who shows up in his magic castle every 100 years, I think. And the castle is filled with monsters, and you basically have to make your way to Dracula and kill him. Which, for some reason, he has a window in his lair.
Yeah.
Although, maybe that's an homage to the original book where Dracula was not affected by sunlight. But, so yeah,
possibly.
That's my background on Castlevania.
Yeah. I mean, with me, it's pretty much the same, really. I've played Symphony of the Night. Played quite a lot of it, actually. But, yeah, I've never completed a Castlevania.
Neither have I.
I'm not that good.
I'm decent at Symphony of the Night, but yeah, I am very much into it.
Yeah, but Symphony of the Night is probably the one I've had the most experience with. But I have played the first one, terrible at it. I'm really terrible at all, you know, the really old school Super Nintendo games. It's just not, I'm just no good at it. I think it's because I'm a lot older and a lot slower.
Well, to me, I have this mindset of, you know, I actually like to see the whole game. I don't like to have to struggle through every single second of it. So that's why I don't get along with those old games. Like, I'm very much a current-gen gamer. I am the guy who will go into fan forums and be like, BioShock is totally better than System Shock, ha ha ha. Which I actually do really like System Shock too. I just think there's some serious problems with it.
Yeah, there
the last
really
two
is.
levels. the fucking Mind of the Many boss fight, which is bullshit. But, and I actually have completed that game, but yeah, so yeah, that's me, and so yeah, we have very limited Castlevania knowledge, but we know enough to know that this script is full of shit.
I know the basic plots, I know what happens, I know what characters are, and I know what enemies they are. So I can tell you now that this script is not a Castlevania script.
Yeah, they don't smack a midget around with a sword once.
Yeah, they have there's no, if you're expecting, like, Simon Belmont to fight a Frankenstein creature, you know, that doesn't happen.
Well, now,
there's none of that.
I'm perfectly okay with the thing not having monsters in every room of every second, but the story they go with and what they do is just stupid.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And like I said, it's not Castlevania because there's no references to the actual backstory of the Dracula from Castlevania.
Which got retconned like 3 times, I think. But yeah, there's that. And so yeah, we know enough about Castlevania that it's full of shit. Now, as for our history on Paul W.S. Anderson, I think I haven't seen all of his movies. I've seen a couple. I haven't seen the first one he did, which is called Shopping, which that title gives me no desire to see it. I really like Mortal Kombat, but that's almost in spite of him. And I like Event Horizon, which is in spite of him, and I sort of like the first Resident Evil movie as a time waster.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to those films, I mean, Mortal Kombat, as a video game adaptation, it actually holds up fairly well.
I still say it's the best. I mean,
it really is pretty good. But again, it's because it has the least amount of Anderson in it, you know? Yeah. It works because he doesn't use any of his stuff you'll see in this script, and he uses it in all of his other movies. And like you said, Resident Evil, I mean, when I did the review, I think I said it's passable, as long as you turn your brain off.
And it's hilarious that Umbrella's logo is absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, so the first Resident Evil, I can forgive it. For the most part.
Now, bear in mind, he did not direct the second or the third, he just wrote them. Because when the second one came around, he was too busy doing AVP, which when I was 12 years old, I liked that movie. I watched it again recently, I'm like, that's a piece of shit. Then again, it looks like a masterpiece compared to what the Strauss brothers did with Requiem.
Oh, Christ, yeah. Oh, I tore that piece of shit apart. Because it's just awful.
I mean, films. As far as the Resident Evil movies go, I mean, I actually haven't seen Soldier. That was the last one he didn't write. It's got Kurt Russell, and it's a pseudo-sequel to Blade Runner, apparently. It's in the same universe.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
It was one of the same writers of Blade Runner, David Webb Peoples, who's written some really good stuff, but Kurt Russell is like a super soldier who was cast off or something. And it's set in the same universe as Blade Runner. So technically the Blade Runner sequel is Blade Runner 3.
That's so strange.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. I mean, I saw Resident Evil 2 and 3, and 2 I watched it and turned my brain off, and it didn't completely offend me, even though I'm like, wow, these supporting characters are annoying.
Yeah, it's kind of like the first one, but extra stupid.
I mean, but the main bad guy is Thomas Kretschmann, so that...
Yes, who's just stereotypically bad guy.
Who is actually one of the only good things about Dario Argento's Dracula.
I haven't seen that.
Don't, unless you're going to review it, don't watch it. Because it is so fucking... I rank it as one of the worst Dracula movies I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot.
Oh, dear. And that's a
I've
big
seen all the
list
Hammer movies, that tells you something. Oh,
yeah.
But yeah, there's that, and I remember I rented them all before the fourth one came out, and I remember I was watching Resident Evil Extinction, and I'm like, this is it was so just boring and bland, I just pulled my phone out while I was watching. I didn't even pay attention to it.
Yeah, it's really bad because I think I said this in the review, we don't see the beginning of these people's journey, and we don't see the end, so it's ultimately pointless, because it's a story that you can only describe as things happen, and that's it.
Yeah, it just felt like a placeholder movie. It's really sad that Russell Mulcahy went from something really, really cool like Highlander, and has fallen so far that he's picking up Paul W.S. Anderson's sloppy seconds and making Scorpion King 2 Rise of a Warrior. Have you seen...
Oh, Christ. Oh, and don't forget Extinction makes nonsensical references to Day of the Dead.
I fucking forgot about it. Well, it's ripped off Day of the Dead.
Yeah, it just rips off whole scenes from Day of the Dead.
Only with Ian Glenn.
Yes.
But yeah, that movie was boring. I didn't see Afterlife. I didn't see Retribution. I didn't see Death Race, which is what he did during when Extinction was being made. But I've heard that's one of his more passable movies. And I didn't see Three Musketeers, which I might have to watch just because it's got Mads Mikkelsen in it.
Oh yeah, I have seen that.
I did not see Pompeii either because I have. After seeing Silent Hill Revelation, I have no interest in seeing Jon Snow headline a movie.
Yeah, and Resident Evil Revelations as well. It's Jon Snow and Ned Stark. That was really insane. Yeah, but Pompeii, from what all I've read about it is just garbage.
Yeah, it sounds like the only reason to watch is Kiefer Sutherland. And now, for some unknown reason, they're like 2/3 of the way through filming final chapter, but they delayed it a while because, for all the fucking those two must have done, she's only just now gotten pregnant. And so they had to wait for her pregnancy to finish, and then now they're filming it, and they're like 2/3 of the way through, but it's still not coming out until 2017.
Honestly, who cares at this point?
No one cares. Even the fans of that series are like just not hyped for it, from what I've read.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you're still clamoring for a sequel after seeing Retribution, there has to be something wrong with you. I don't want to insult anyone, but there is nothing good about Retribution, and there is no reason why anyone should be excited for a sequel to that.
I mean, the only reason I'd want to see it, because what I've seen of the guy who plays Wesker is that he is absolutely glorious in his badness.
Oh god, yeah. He's just
Although from what I've
up.
read, he's apparently filming on different days from pretty much everybody else for Final Chapter, so he's probably only going to be in the very end of it.
Or they're going to do some weird thing where he's supposed to be in a scene, but they filmed the scene separately. Which will be hilarious to see,
like
I'm
the way
sure they'll
Steven
fuck it
Seagal
up.
does all his movies now.
Yeah, exactly,
But
yeah.
that guy, I mean, and you know what's ridiculous is that when Romero was going to do Resident Evil, I think one of the people he was thinking about for Wesker was James Woods.
that would have been really interesting.
I love James Woods. Goddamn.
I think that would have been a reason to
it's
go
like
up
you put
that
Barry Burton in your movie and you kill him off. Who's probably my favorite Resident Evil character.
Yeah.
And like, you brought everyone back from the dead for no reason in that one, from what I understand. And then they hint at the Leon Ada relationship, which I always thought was retarded in the games, but that's just because I played Resident Evil 2 for the first time like last year. I was laughing my ass off at the romantic scenes in it because it's just like, eh.
Yeah, it just doesn't really work, especially because, you know, let's be honest, the graphics are
bad.
What can only be described as crepe paper made of art.
Yes, that's the kind of graphical style that the first Silent Hill game took and made it look really good and detailed. Like, yeah. It's like, wow, the Resident Evil games look really shit in comparison.
They really do.
I'm like, that's, because I mean, I'm always the guy who's like, I don't care about dated graphics because I was playing the first Silent Hill and I'm like, this looks really, really good.
Yeah.
Like, insanely good. And then I looked at like the first Resident Evil and I'm like, wow, all the walls are like solid colors.
Yeah, I think it's all down to how you present it. Cause with Silent Hill you have, everything looks like it should be there. Whereas with Resident Evil, you have these really elaborately made set pieces, and then the characters, they're all blocky and terrible. Which, you know, it's kind of why I like the remake
I love the
more.
remake.
Because it actually works.
That's the only version of the first one I've actually played is the remake. I was really frustrated and angry at it the first time I played it, but it's a game I'm just in a groove with now, so it's like I can pop that in and be like, okay, let's shoot some zombies, even though I hate playing as Chris, but...
Right. Which remake is it? Because they've remade it like
the
so many
version
times
I
now.
had was the re-release of the GameCube version for the Wii.
So the
first remake. I've had that, and I've downloaded the HD remake of the remake. I have it on my PS3, but I haven't played it yet.
Right, okay.
And I've played 2, and what's weird about Silent Hill is that came out the same year, I think, as, or at least very close to, Resident Evil 3. And that has a more believable town in it than Resident Evil 3 does, because Resident Evil 3 has the city with the narrowest streets ever.
It really does, yeah. And, I mean, the whole concept of the whole Resident Evil thing of you need this specific key for this specific door, it's like the town has been deliberately made to be the most annoying place to get around.
And Silent Hill does that really well, because it's like, oh, it's all this weird shit going on anyways.
Yeah. It makes more sense in Silent Hill, honestly.
Okay, moving on from Resident Evil. So Paul W.S. Anderson, his first two movies I like, but man, did he fall off a cliff.
I'm pretty sure, because I really love Event Horizon.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I liked it.
It's definitely one of my favorite horror movies.
I know that from the Ghost Ship review.
And, yeah, exactly. And what I find is interesting is that every other movie I haven't liked of his has been when he's added the WS in the middle of his name. So I'm pretty sure he was possessed by some sort of creature that is the WS in his name. That latched onto him and made him shit.
Let's see if we can come up with a properly Lovecraftian name for WS.
Yeah. It's like the name has transformed him. Because he's just terrible once he started calling himself Paul W.S. Anderson.
Why even... I mean, I wonder if that is actually part of his name, or if he just put that in there.
Yeah, I'm not too sure why he needed to stipulate.
He put the middle initials in there to differentiate himself from Paul Thomas Anderson.
Oh, yeah,
that's why he did, because Paul Thomas Anderson came up right around the same time he did, more or less.
Yeah, that's right,
Because Boogie Nights was like the same year as Event Horizon.
Right. Wow, those are totally different films.
Boogie Nights is awesome. Thomas Jane cameo, yeah, what's not to like? Well, Crow City of Angels had a Thomas Jane cameo.
Yeah.
But yeah, this script, so going by the date on it, which is June 2006, he wrote this sometime after he wrote Resident Evil 2 and AVP. And he actually was going to direct this at the time, so this would have been, it would have been, a Paul W.S. Anderson movie.
Yeah, you would have got full Anderson.
So this would have been either painfully mediocre or just really, really terrible.
Yeah.
And the script itself, for most of it, I wasn't angry at it. Like, I was kind of like, oh, this Dracula backstory is so hilariously wrong. I was kind of mad at that. For most of it, was just kind of like, this is bad, and it's kind of annoying, but it's not that bad. It fucking dives off a cliff with the ending. But, so, okay, let's get into this bastard.
Yeah. Oh, you have to make a note of the fact that it stipulates the tagline.
Which, yes, that was the first thing I made a note of, is that, oh my god, they are not doing the reincarnated dead wife bullshit in this. Because the last time, and I've never been a fan of that, and the last time I saw it got introduced literally in the last 10 minutes of Argento's Dracula, out of fucking nowhere.
Well, it's this bizarre thing that writers seem to want to do, is make Dracula more sympathetic.
And I actually know where that was. At least one of the earliest versions of that came from. There was a Dracula TV movie in the 70s, which was produced by Dan Curtis, who did a bunch of 60s and 70s TV. I believe he was part of Dark Shadows. He created Night Stalker and a bunch of other like cool 70s stuff. And it was decided during the writing process that they needed an excuse. Because one of the things people like to pitch about the original book is that Dracula has all of England to choose from, yet he focuses on these two specific women. And so Richard Matheson, who I hate the fact that he came up with this because he's one of my favorite writers. He wrote the teleplay, and so he came up with the idea that it was Lucy in this version who resembled his dead wife. And so that when they kill Lucy, the reason why he goes and focuses on them after that is because he's really pissed off and wants revenge, which that's actually far more clever than what everyone else has done with it. Which I actually kind of like the idea, because apparently there's a scene, I haven't seen it, but I kind of want to, because Jack Palance plays Dracula, and he finds Lucy's decapitated and staked through the heart corpse. He just gets really, really angry. I mean, it sounds like it's actually kind of a smart idea. It's actually kind of clever the way it sounds like it's done there, unlike everyone else who wants to ship Dracula and Mina for God knows what reason.
Yeah, it's bizarre that, because they go for the least subtle route possible. Main character has this potential wife. I can't remember if he's married to her or not.
He marries her partway through the book. Because she goes to get him while he's at the nunnery or the monastery, and it's in Budapest in the book, because he actually managed, even though he was like half mad from his experiences, he somehow managed to get on a train.
Yes. But yeah, it's this whole concept of the main character has this love interest, so the bad guy has to go after that love interest too. It's the least subtle way to do it.
I will say, it's Coppola's version who really popularized that idea. And I will say, if I were a woman and I was stuck with a choice between Keanu and Gary Oldman, the choice is obvious, although the character, I still maintain Mina's characterization, and that makes zero sense, because she goes within a split second of going, "You killed Lucy, I hate you," to, "Ooh, I love you, take me with you." And
that's the fact that, Winona Ryder, not the best at
accents. And you know why she
either.
took that role, right? It's because she was supposed to play Michael Corleone's daughter in Godfather 3, but she had to pull out at the last minute. So she did that as a favor. Yeah. And I mean, Keanu, he's not good in that movie, but he does try.
Yeah, he's definitely trying, and I think that's
and Gary Oldman is good, but he's always... I've never seen the movie he was bad in.
I can say Lost in Space.
He's hilarious in Lost in Space. He turns into CGI Spider-Man in that, right?
Yeah,
but it's just such an uneven movie, because Dracula is presented as monstrous as he is in the books, but then will completely shift gears and try and make him sympathetic, and it just doesn't.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense, especially after you've seen his like bizarre hairy wolf man basically raping a woman.
That was weird. And then he has it.
Yeah, that was definitely the more sort of head fuck.
Yes.
Coppola moment.
I'd say it's one of the last watchable Coppola movies I've seen, because I can still watch that movie, even though I'm not a huge fan of it. Although one of the things that bugs me about that movie is that it seems to it loves to point out the fact that it seems to almost revel in the fact that its sets look incredibly fake.
Yes, it really does. It's trying to say, it's trying to do the whole
we're like an old movie.
Yeah, old movie theater thing. But it doesn't run with it far enough.
I'm like, okay, why is like the perfume dripping upwards? And then I know one guy gave his excuse for liking the movie is the fact that Monica Bellucci has her tits out in the movie, which I can't argue with that, but I can see that in better movies.
Yeah, you don't need to watch a shitty movie.
You can watch
for that
Brotherhood of the Wolf. Have you seen that?
Exactly. No,
there's
a
scene where she's lying naked on the bed, and it fades from her tits into a pair of mountains. That movie's amazing. I love that movie, but it's just so weirdly uneven, and the tone is so campy that it doesn't work. And then the whole love is basically Mina steals from the other members of the group at the end.
Yeah,
and Love saves him. And I still maintain that I don't understand why anything in that prologue actually happens. Why does stabbing the cross make it bleed and then turn him into a vampire?
It's trying to be a bit more metaphorical, I guess.
Although, have you seen the extended version of that scene? Where the cross sprays so much blood, the room begins to flood with it.
Oh, I do remember that, yes. It basically it becomes like a room from The Shining.
Wait. I don't know if that movie is... And I think Anthony Hopkins is good in some scenes, but really annoying in others.
Yeah, Anthony Hopkins as Van Helsing actually makes a lot of sense. And he has the presence of Van Helsing, but he does descend into a bit too camp sometimes, and a bit too serious in others when he really shouldn't be. But there's also moments where, like, he's explaining to the group what they have to do to kill Lucy. Or, I can't remember if it was before or after, and he just casually says, "Oh, we just cut off her head and stick her in heart, and it should be all fine."
And he says... Oh, no, it's like he wants some post-mortem knives, and they completely divorce this from the context in the book, where he says, "Oh, I just want to cut off her head and remove her heart." Which he actually which that doesn't make any sense, because he doesn't remove her heart, because that was what he was going to do initially in the book, and then he changes his mind.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm glad they dropped from the book is his broken English, which was really irritating to read.
Yeah, it really was.
But yeah, that movie it has some things I like in it, like Gary Oldman, even with his ridiculous wardrobe.
Yeah, because he's wearing really stylish.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about his hair.
Oh yeah, well that's obviously everyone points out that
the tit hair,
ridiculous.
which even Leslie Nielsen couldn't make that more ridiculous.
Yes, I mean it actually worked better on Leslie Nielsen if I remember correctly.
I actually don't mind that movie as much as most people do, but
No, it's actually not
But
too bad.
to get off of Bram Stoker's Dracula, it just seems that, like, everybody either wants to make Lucy the reincarnation of his wife, or not Lucy, Mina, and then ship Mina in Dracula. Because, okay, it happens a shitload in movies. It happens it gets introduced in Argento's Dracula in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, even Alan Moore did it to a certain extent in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I don't remember that. I remember...
Because you have Mina basically... Well,
I've read
in
the comics,
book, yeah. In the book, I don't think she's a vampire.
No, she's not. She's a victim.
Movie,
she's a rape victim, essentially.
Yeah, but in the movie, which we don't really want to talk about... I think that movie's
hilarious myself.
Yeah, but they do run with the whole... She becomes a vampire through Dracula and all this ridiculousness.
But yeah, they do that, and two really ridiculous examples of shipping Mina with Dracula. I've read two different sequels to the novel, and they both have very similar titles. They're both called Dracula the Undead, only one has a hyphen in Undead and one doesn't. The first one was called Dracula the Undead, and it was written in the 80s. That's without the hyphen. And it's a decent enough follow-up to the story. And then basically what happens is that in the last third, Dracula kidnaps Mina and they end up falling in love through the magic of Stockholm Syndrome. And he ends up becoming the hero and sacrificing himself to close the gates of hell. Because they talk about the Sholomants and everything that was in the book. And then the even worse book, which was written by Stoker's great-grandson, the officially authorized sequel called Dracula the Undead with a hyphen, which I have read this, and is the shittiest book ever written, probably. Oh, yeah, it's so bad I've removed most of it from my memory, but basically what you find out is that, because at the end of the original novel you find out that Jonathan and Mina have their son, whom they named Quincy after their dead friend. You find out that Dracula is the real father. And you even get a Luke, I am your father moment.
Oh, Jesus. That's... terrible.
And they basically spend that entire book making every character from the original look like a huge asshole. And then killing them off one by one. Basically, they're getting impaled up the ass and out the mouth like Vlad the Impaler did. And when you find out it's not Vlad the Impaler, it's not Dracula doing it, it's Elizabeth Bathory posing as Dracula, trying to make people think Dracula's doing it. And you find... and you find out that Dracula is actually the good guy, and he's fighting the evil that is Elizabeth Bathory, and they had like opposing mentors that was never explained. And at the end, like, the coffins get loaded onto the Titanic. It was fucking shit.
That is so much unnecessary.
But yeah, we've hammered in the Love is Immortal bit. So getting into this script, it starts out in, do they give the year? I don't remember. But it's World War II, so it has to be 1940s.
Yes, they say 1943.
Oh, okay. August 13th, 1943, because we have to know the exact date.
Yes.
And it begins with a troop of German soldiers finding a dead patrol of German soldiers in an obvious Predator homage. Because they were firing in all directions and they hit nothing. Which is one more Predator homage than his AVP movie had. Because the Predators in that movie just show up.
Yeah.
Both of them really are more interested in being alien movies, but that's off the point. But so you have this prologue where basically, and the only reason I can think this is in here is because he wanted to have Nazis, or to give him slightly more credit, he wanted to do an homage to The Keep. Because, have you read or seen that? I've read the book and I've seen the movie. Which is it.
I think I've read about the movie.
It's basically about German soldiers in a abandoned castle in Romania. And the movie has Ian McKellen in it playing a Jew who, he's a Jewish professor that they bring there to investigate what's going on, and he makes a pact with the monster in the castle to kill off all of Nazi Germany if he helps it get stronger.
Wow.
So basically he's Magneto. But so basically the soldiers, they go into this town, and they're all acting really weird, saying, we don't want you to go up to this castle, which they describe as being carved out of the mountain. Now, one thing that confused me here is that maybe I've just misread it, is that in this prologue, it reads like the castle is way up high on the mountain away from the village. And then when you get to the main part of the book, it's literally right there. Script. It's lit.
Yeah, it's literally within walking distance because the villagers show up there so quickly.
It's like a little statue garden. and then into the castle. But so we have this prologue, which it doesn't really add up to much, except the Nazis end up taking all the villagers up there, and they're going like, "Who killed this patrol?" And they're like shooting and killing the villagers, and the now keep this in mind because it doesn't make any sense later. The villagers are like, no one goes up to the castle, and
they're all very fearful.
Yes, and
of
then
the
like
whole
out
thing.
of the many labyrinthian passages, this cloud of bats, which they can kind of see a shape in the middle of, kills everybody, and then the villagers cover it up by dumping the German vehicles into the lake. And,
yeah, and it's deliberately obtuse about the shape
because
as
it wants
well.
to keep the mystery, I suppose. And all that reminded me of was the trailer for Dracula Untold, where he bursts into the cloud of bats, which was actually a decent-looking effect.
It's a bit too Batman for me, though.
Batman doesn't turn into bats.
No, but there's that scene in Batman Begins where he uses
I actually
bats.
haven't seen Dracula Untold yet, but it's probably better than the script.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the idea of Luke Evans as Dracula for whatever reason. But yeah, so you get this whole prologue. And the thing is that I'm okay with a prologue as long as they come back to it in some way. This script fucking doesn't. Like, it completely forgets, it keeps referencing, like when it's describing the set dressing of the castle and whatnot in the rest of the script, it keeps referencing it over and over again.
It also feels like it's referencing it deliberately for the reader of the script,
just so that...
Because in the film, it wouldn't be as obvious.
Or at least, Anderson wants you to make sure that this, and this are there in the one of, like, the 3 rooms of the castle they visit.
Yeah. Because the castle is described as so massive, but we only see, like, 3 rooms.
And there is a moment later on in the script where they're looking for someone in the castle, and, like, they go out to go look for someone, and it cuts, and then, like, the one guy walks and goes, like, we've searched the entire place, he's not here.
Yeah. And, it's literally just a night or something, isn't it? And, it's a bit... they don't really establish the castle as an actual logical thing. They keep saying how illogical it is, as well. But it never really...
It just feels like a regular castle. Like, it's not this weird, almost kind of, almost has a life of its own like it does in the games.
Yeah, because in the games it's supposed to be established that, like, rooms move about and it changes. But they don't do any of that.
Really, but there's that, but we have this whole prologue in the castle. But they never ever come back to this whole time period. They dump the cars in the lake and you see that there's all these different conveyances and vehicles from different time periods before, which... Okay, how many people had stumbled on this place in the middle of nowhere? Let's be honest.
Yeah, and what I thought as well is, maybe you should stop people from going there if you have to destroy so many of them vehicles.
Which doesn't make any sense when you find out what's going on with the villagers. But basically, it moves back in time to 1576, and it describes Simon Belmont and his brother Christopher are leading an army of Romanian knights to protect this specific village from Turkish raiders. Now, I'm going to get into my history rant a little bit here, starting off with the Romanian Knights, because Romania did not exist in 1576. It did not exist as such until 1866.
So that's
and even then, Transylvania was not part of it at that point. It wasn't part of it.
No, Transylvania was
not until
separate,
after World War I. It was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or Hungary, the Kingdom of Hungary at this point. And also... leading against Turks who are going to raid this village. Turks wouldn't need to be raiding Romanian villages at this point because they pretty much owned that whole area. Because by 1576, they were making, at least by that point, they were making their designs on Austria. And it was the siege of Vienna where they got their asses kicked, and so they couldn't make it any further. They left behind their cart full of coffee, which introduced it to the Western world, allegedly. Which that's how the story goes. So this whole thing doesn't make any sense historically.
But, I mean, I didn't really expect anything.
Well, there was one moment where I thought, he might have slightly done his research, but then it's like, nope. Because Dracula explains that his name means son of Dracul, the dragon, which is true. And that he's the son of Vlad Dracul. Well, I'm like, okay, you did your research on that. Then I read the background they gave him, like, no, he didn't. So we get this, we get introduced to our lead characters, who are Simon, Christopher, because it has to sound foreign, and the man who raised them named Vlas. whom he's called Vlas because his actual Middle Eastern name is too long for them to remember. Which, that's a joke he stole from the Doom movie.
Yeah, it really was as well. I remember that joke, and it's
It's literally identical. And this is the guy we think might have been played by Colin Salmon. Even though, interestingly enough, he doesn't really die in this.
No, and he's actually a lot more useful.
There's a moment where I'm like, oh, he's going to get torn to pieces, isn't he? But nope. So they're leading what I thought was just like a small group of people, but it turns out they have like a whole army with them.
Yeah, it's not really described very well, the amount of people. Because at some points it's like it's a whole army, and other points it's just a few men that are like loyal to Belmont and all
we
this.
should mention that up until over halfway through the script, there is no mention of Simon Belmont having a whip. He just has a sword. I'm okay with him fighting with a sword at first, but he's got to have the whip. And not in the way that this script does it.
Yeah, it was more insulting. Because, I mean, for someone who's not played the game much, but I still know how integral the whip is to the whole idea of Belmont.
Yes,
you know?
It's the magic.
And it's almost deliberately doesn't use it to any extent.
I don't think it was deliberate. I just think he fucking forgot about it and then went, oh shit, whip.
Yeah, but he doesn't use it so much it almost feels deliberate, you know?
Which, alright, there's that, and then, okay, these characters, these leads, are so thinly sketched they might as well be like literally two-dimensional. Because
yeah, they don't really have much of a personality.
Simon is the serious one. Christopher, because he has this, why didn't they just fucking call him Christoph? Because that will make sense. He's the goofy, jokey, silly one. And Vlas is the stern mentor figure. And that's it. And they come across this wagon of gypsies, because of course Paul Anderson would use the word gypsy. Yeah. And these gypsies are in danger. Oh, Pacific Rim reference. Sorry. But
that went right over my head, sorry.
But he finds them in danger, getting chased by these wolves, most of whom are gray, and there's a large black one, which is obviously Dracula in wolf form. And they're specifically chasing after this woman named Orica, who is the Mila Jovovich of this script.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, after a while, I just kept picturing her playing the role.
And she is a badass female, but for a while I'm like, okay, this isn't as bad as it could be, because at least Simon gets to do stuff.
Yeah, and she doesn't take over as the hero.
We'll get to that.
But then again,
yes.
Get to that.
And obviously it's like, okay, she's the reincarnated Dracula's wife, because we can't do anything different with that. In fact, that's actually kind of the whole Dracula being emo over a dead wife thing is actually happens twice from what I've read of the Castlevania games. Because originally he had his human wife Lisa, who was Alucard's mother, who was burned as a witch because she brought medicine for the sick, and that's why he's pissed off at humanity. And then Lament of Innocence retconned that to the fact that he became Dracula because he's going to make war on God because he's pissed that his wife died of an illness. Which I know family dying is horrible, but grow some thicker skin, you asshole.
Yeah, because you are literally condemning thousands of millions of innocent people just because of this bad thing that happened.
Just because she died of an illness. I mean, at least getting wrongly burned as a witch makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah, that makes more sense to be a bit angry about it.
And him being Dracula, because he was already Dracula with his powers by that point, so of course he's going to be evil and shit.
Yeah.
But okay, where was I? But yeah, they rescue her from the wolves, and there's actually 2 action scenes with these wolves, because we can't go 5 minutes without an action scene.
Yeah, they really hammered in the wolves as a really big part. They just kept coming back.
It's weird.
And it was just annoying. And of course, they always mention the black wolf and trying to be really clever and subtle, but it's just obviously Dracula.
And
just
he fights Christopher, which we know where this is going.
Yes.
No, he does not turn into a Nightbreed, which would be amazing. He starts turning into a vampire, which there's so much build up for that in this script, it goes fucking nowhere.
Yeah, it's built up as something really big, but it's just there's just nothing. It's just a way for Simon to fight someone other than Dracula.
And it's really anticlimactic, and it goes into some really stupid places, like bringing in vampire lore from places I would never bring it in from. And okay, so they meet this woman, and you think she's going to be a love interest for Simon, but they don't really start doing that until over halfway through the script, and it seems almost completely one-sided on his part.
Yeah, it really does. Because the whole... It was trying to do a love triangle thing with Simon and Dracula and Orica, but it doesn't really come off in that there are times when she's interested in Dracula, there's times when she's interested in Simon.
He never really seemed more than vaguely interested in Simon.
There's very small bits, but it's like, even if you think about it in a film, it wouldn't be in there. You wouldn't
and that will
notice
lead
any
to
of
a
that.
huge question I have about the ending when we get to it. But,
Yeah.
okay, so we have that, and they come to this village that they're supposed to protect from the Turks, because apparently this village that's in the middle of nowhere just gets found by everybody,
Yeah,
including
we've established
the Turks.
that.
And so they come there, and they make note that these are the same people from the 1943 prologue. So you know something wrong is going on. And then they're perfect. And apparently everybody knows about this village, but nobody knows about the castle.
Yeah, that's the thing. And the biggest question I have is, the whole point is that the Turks are going to raid this village.
There's nothing
Why?
there.
What is so special about this village?
Unless they just
nothing.
think the Turks are like the orcs from Lord of the Rings, and they'll just burn everything.
It just makes no sense. It's just an excuse to get them there, let's be honest.
It's an excuse to get them to this place, and which you don't need an excuse if you look at the games, but...
No. The excuse is already laid out for you.
have a feud with Dracula. And I'll actually go through my idea of how I would do a Castlevania movie trilogy of sorts when we get to the end of this.
Yeah.
Which I actually have a rather ambitious idea for the third one, I believe. But yeah, we get to this, and they get there, and they kind of wander around the castle a little bit. They find some empty rooms. They find the big main hall with the chessboard. And then he goes up to oh, by the way, were the wolves running around in daylight?
It's never expressly
Because I believe
mentioned.
the sun is setting when they go up onto the parapet.
Yeah, it's from what I remember, it could be night, but it could also be day. It's very difficult to interpret, really.
See, I just kind of assumed it was day, because it almost sounded like they were describing sunset when Simon goes up onto the castle wall and he meets Dracula, which...
Yeah, well, yeah, I assumed it was day as well, because, fuck
and
it.
of course Dracula can run around during the day, but he can't shapeshift, Paul.
Yeah.
But okay, here's the thing that annoyed me the most about Dracula in this script, is the fucking apostrophe in his name.
Yes! It was just so unnecessary.
The actual Romanian name, Dracula, does not have an apostrophe in it. It doesn't. No. It just doesn't at all. And then you find out that his dead wife, her name is Alicia, with an apostrophe before the A.
Yeah, it just had a weird fixation with making just
They wanted to make it sound exotic.
Yeah. I mean, the way I was reading it, I kind of thought he was going with the original pronunciation. I almost said the pronunciation. Oh, God. The original pronunciation of Dracula.
Dracula,
And that's how I thought, but it's... Why put that in the script and make it annoying?
Yes, but it's not even in this, because I've seen several variant spellings of Dracula, none of which have an apostrophe. I've seen one which is spelled Dracul, which is the German transliteration. It does not have an apostrophe.
Yeah, it's almost like the apostrophe makes it exotic.
Okay, so basically, to move through this part, they meet him, and right as Simon meets him on the castle wall, of course, he knows nothing about Dracula, because this is not the Simon Belmont from the games. And by the way, Simon Belmont's time period was 1691. Which, I know that from fucking Castlevania wikiing this shit. But okay, the Turks attack this village, and they apparently send an entire army to this place. Because the villagers and Simon's little small army hole up in the castle, and the Turks get Dracula sets off his booby traps and kills the Turks with them, which that was actually kind of cool.
Yeah, that was interesting. It was definitely a callback to the games and how those traps are around the place.
Yeah. So yeah, the Turks. That's like the first of 2 times they show up in this. So we have this big fight scene with the Turks, which really is just an excuse for an action scene.
Yeah, but what I found was quite hilarious as well is that the Belmont army is going to protect the village, and the first sign of the Turks is like, let's get in the castle. Fuck the village.
Fuck the village. Number 2 is an asshole.
Yeah, because they just forget about the village because apparently that doesn't need protecting. They just want to save their own asses.
Yes, they didn't even know the castle was there.
No.
First of all, why does this village need protection anyways? I mean, why would anyone go there?
Yeah, it's just...
And then, okay, so after the battle, which I actually kind of liked how they don't know how he's controlling it, and then you find out how, which is kind of like, oh, that's kind of like a video game puzzle. But, because it's basically the chessboard is, you move the pieces and that causes things to happen.
Yeah, and I did like the fact that, the big bridge, it rotates, doesn't it? And I actually thought about that in a game, and I could see it. You as the character, you're walking along, it rotates, you have to jump in the right moment.
There's something like that in Silent Hill Downpour where you're walking on clock hands that are spinning around.
Yes.
I know everybody else hates that game, but I like it.
But yeah, the video game references was there. It just, that was the only time. They were more
generic video game references.
Yeah. It was more an overall game trope rather than Castlevania.
Okay, so they hole up there for the night, and Christopher is getting obviously sicker because in this universe, a single bite from a vampire turns you into one, which is not how it fucking works. Yeah, that's I always hate it when they do that. Unless it's like vampire as a plague, which that makes a certain amount of sense, but yeah, that's not how it works here. Most of the time when they do it, it's a little bit more ambiguous than that. But that's not how it works. It shouldn't work like that in a Dracula story.
No, definitely not.
Then again, zombie bites are supposed to turn you into zombies, and I get bit all the time in Resident Evil, and that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so all the knights are holed up in the castle, and they're having a feast, and Dracula makes little shadow puppets and explains his backstory of how this castle got there. And this story is the biggest bullshit story I have ever heard. It's like, I'm like, oh, okay, we're gonna hear about how Vlad the Impaler becomes Dracula. No, this is so hilariously wrong in every detail. It makes that prologue to Bram Stoker's Dracula look like a historical text in comparison.
It really does. It's not, but it kind of takes that prologue and makes it even more ridiculous.
So let me give the general version of this story. The Turks are going to invade Romania, which that doesn't make any sense. And so King Radu the Weak, or whatever they call him, he forms the Order of the Dragon, which is an order of knights to help fight the Turks, one of which is Vlad Dracul, who is really good at his job and scares them away with a Forest of the Impaled, which did kind of happen, but not in the way they describe here. And then he turns it into, he basically crushes their army right then and there. And so the Turks are driven out, but then King Radu gets really paranoid that Dracul wants to be on the throne, and so what he does is that he accuses him of black magic, has him imprisoned, and then burns his wife at the stake, because we need a dead wife for Dracula to angst over. And then Dracula's supporters, well, his name is Dracul at this point, they break him out. He kills King Radu, whom they have to point out he pisses himself at this point. And then they don't explain, and then basically he disappears. And supposedly he might have fallen in and learned the black magic that he was accused of and became the sorcerer for real. Yes.
Oh, and it's supposed to be a bit of a big reveal that the people who broke him out of the prison were the villagers. But it's just not important.
The villagers are not important
because the villagers have no personality. So it's just there.
You have the mayor and then everybody else, and that's it. But you have,
and it's only the mayor by name.
Yes. Now they don't explain exactly what happened after that until later, so I'll leave it. But it gets even more bullshit. Just from a historical perspective. Now, to explain, I'm going to give a relatively brief summary of Vlad's history. Basically, his father, Vlad Dracul, no, they were not the same person, who was a member of the Order of the Dragon, which was an order of Germanic knights. It was not formed specifically. He became Prince of Wallachia, which is south of Transylvania, by basically he traded his two younger sons, Vlad and Radu, to the Turks as hostages, so he became prince. And then eventually the boyars, who were the nobles, they basically turned against him eventually. They killed him, and then his older son Mircea was blinded and buried alive. And so figuring that Vlad would want to get revenge against the boyars, the Turks released him after horribly abusing him essentially and teaching him all their torture methods. they sent him home to become prince, and he kind of came and went as prince, but he took over, went on an anti-Boyar campaign, killed a shitload of people. He slaughtered a German Transylvanian trading town because he felt like the Germans were impeding on Wallachian economics. And then he started actively antagonizing the Turks, and he actually became part of an official crusade against them and did pretty well, but they came back in greater force. And his wife at this point did jump off the castle, but he basically went, fuck it, I'm out of here, and then fled to Hungary, where he got imprisoned by the King of Hungary for reasons which aren't entirely clear, but it's believed that he wanted to de-emphasize the crusade against the Turks in favor of focusing on making himself Holy Roman Emperor, so he made Vlad look like a traitor. So he imprisoned him, and eventually he got out by converting to Roman Catholicism and marrying the king's sister, or cousin, or something like that. Came back, and in his absence, his brother Radu, who stayed with the Turks and was the Sultan's lover, I believe, had taken over and died. And so he came and took over again, and eventually he was killed, and we're not really sure how he died, because there's like 4 or 5 different accounts of it. But they took his head, preserved it in honey, and then put it on a spike in Constantinople. And that is that.
Yeah.
Do you see the problems here?
Basically, he just knew the names and
he
wrote
didn't
them
even
down.
know the names.
He got Radu.
He
and
got
that's it.
Radu, and he got Dracul.
Yeah, and he just kind of made
and he got
everything
that
up
there was an
around
Order
it.
of the Dragon, and he just bullshitted his way through the rest of this. So yes, this backstory is even more bullshit than the prologue of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, I'm perfectly okay with making Count Dracula and Vlad the Impaler one and the same, because the book kind of sort of hints at that.
Yeah.
But holy crap, is that so far off?
Well, it's doubly annoying because first, it's just bullshit. But second, there's a decent story and backstory there to go already, and they just don't bother with it.
Vlad the Impaler is an incredibly interesting figure in history.
Yeah.
I've read at least 2 books about him, and I'm like, this guy is fascinating because he was kind of a heroic figure, yet a complete sociopath at the same time.
Yeah, he was a complete psychotic, mass-murdering genocidist, and all this horrible stuff, but he's still respected in the Romanian culture as well.
That's true, and I'll say this for all, the fictional crossing over and just general, crossover insanity that the Anno Dracula books get, they're more respectful towards Vlad the Impaler than this is. And I am willing to bet good money that Dracula Untold is more historically accurate than this.
I would not be surprised.
That was a movie which, that movie was weirdly enough, they first announced it in 2009 as Dracula Year Zero when Sam Worthington was attached. And then it just went away, and then suddenly there's a trailer and the movie's coming out.
Yeah, it was very strange, the whole process of that.
Now, there is supposed to be a Vlad the Impaler movie that was announced, and Brad Pitt was producing it. And Brad Pitt's production company has put out some really good shit. Yeah, The Assassination of Jesse James.
Oh, I didn't realize
that movie was amazing. And really historically accurate, too.
Yeah.
Or we could say for this, but basically the story cuts off because Christopher, who's turning into a vampire, starts freaking out and notices that on the table is all the maggoty food from Hellraiser Bloodline.
Yeah, I totally got the Hellraiser Bloodline thing.
And he notices
so weird.
that the villagers are all deaders.
Yeah,
they're Dracula's zombie servants, but they don't explain that until way, 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 way later.
Yeah, and I was honestly hoping that they would come back as the iconic skeleton.
The skeleton or the zombies guys from the opening hallway and
but they just don't.
Maybe. Okay, I just learned this from playing Symphony of the Night. I didn't realize until I got to the library that those giant wolves were called wargs. So it's the same universe as Lord of the Rings. That would be amazing if you could play as Azog the Pale Orc in Castlevania.
Yeah, that's a massive crossover.
Oh man, and there are vampires in Tolkien, so.
Yeah.
But you have this, and you have this might have been before the big storytelling scene, but Orica wanders off to steal stuff because she's the thief in this RPG. And
yes, she just is in and just starts nicking everything.
And there's a moment where she's walking down the hallway, and they describe in detail one of those, a shadowy figure runs in front of the camera. They describe it in detail like it's actually supposed to be scary. The only time I've seen that work was in John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah. It's such a classic, jump scare orchestra sting that really doesn't do anything. And it's described like that.
But there's that, and then there's a lot of sort of creepy but cliche moments where there's a disembodied hand running through her hair. And then Dracula shows her the portrait of his Okay, this was confusing. Was it of his dead wife, or was it a portrait that she sat for? Because they seem to say both.
Yeah, the conversation implies that it was specifically a picture of her, because she talks about how he paid her to paint it.
Yes.
He paid her to model for it. But there are times where it mentions another painting, which I don't know is the same painting, of his dead wife.
Yes, and then one of the things I kind of liked about this is that she kind of sort of is into Dracula, but not because of the reincarnation bullshit. She just kind of thinks he's a little attractive. Which, okay, yeah. Making Dracula young and attractive is one of those things where it's been done so many times it doesn't bother me that much, but I'm still like, can we get, like an older dude? Like, he doesn't have to be super old, but can we get, like, Mads Mikkelsen?
Yeah,
he's if I ever make a Dracula movie, I'm casting him.
Absolutely.
And then I'd have to be forced to suppress the temptation to cast Hugh Dancy as Jonathan Harker.
Oh, that would be like Hannibal.
Too meta. Which, weirdly enough, tangent, but you know who was the runner-up for play Hannibal? David Tennant.
No? Oh, yes, he was, yes! I was really interested to see what that would have been like. Well, you want a glimpse
of that, watch Jessica Jones. Because he's the bad guy in that, and he's kind of crazy.
Okay, I will make a note of that.
But back to Castlevania. So you have that whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of losing track of the order shit happened in this, because it really doesn't matter that much.
No, it's just stuff happens, basically, at this point.
To scroll through my notes... okay, right after that, there's a bit where there was some captured Turkish prisoners, and Dracula's he kills one, he's about to kill the other, and then his three brides show up.
Oh yeah, the three brides thing, which I don't think is in the game.
I kind of like the idea that the three brides are in it, because that's one of those bits of Dracula lore that kind of gets forgotten about sometimes. And they were really annoying, though. They reminded me a lot of Van Helsing.
Yeah, it was pretty much the exact same characters from Van Helsing.
You want to know what the weirdest part of these three brides was for me? One of them was named Alessa.
Oh yeah,
yes. I can't. If she got set on fire, it would had to have been an intentional Silent Hill reference.
It was such a because they all have really. I hesitate to use the word exotic names, but they're all very similar names as well, which made them very confusing.
But yes, there's that, but the Alessa name, all I could think of was that either he's something of a Silent Hill fan and he really wanted to make his own Silent Hill movie, which we know would have been shit. Worse than the actual ones we have, which the first one's alright. But either that or because this was written in June 2006, or he had seen the movie and its theatrical run and went, Alessa, and just put the name into the script.
That probably sounds more likely.
Because he seems like a guy who watches movies and then rips them off.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the whole Day of the Dead thing.
There's a few more rip-offs or homages, I guess, I can point out as this goes along. But okay. Oh, I also point out that this tension between Simon, there's scenes with romantic tension between Simon, Dracula, and Orica. And it really does feel like he had, Twilight love triangle 2 years before that movie came out.
Yeah, it does.
Actually, several years, more years than that, because the love triangle wasn't until the second movie, which I only ever saw the first two.
Well, yeah.
I did read the books, though. Don't ask me why.
Oh God, I really want to know.
It's been a long time, and I don't remember. I really don't remember. But we have that, and then Orica gets because Christopher has run off, and so Orica is like, they take her to a bedroom to lie down.
Yeah, and Christopher just disappears for the majority of the film after that.
But she's and she has the necklace that Simon gave her, which has the cross on it, because we gotta use that bit from the original novel for some reason. And so Dracula comes in, and I forgot, there was a bit of foreshadowing as to what Dracula actually looks like, because Christopher looks around and sees the zombie people, and he sees what Dracula looks like, but the audience doesn't.
Yeah, it specifically says that we don't see it.
But then, this is like 10 minutes later, he's going in to get her, and he's sort of controlling her and making her remember, and then he sees the cross, and it burns him just by looking at it. And he jumps up, and he...
it's so powerful that even if he's within... seeing it.
That's not how it works later in the script, even. The whole thing with the crucifixes, that's one huge, huge pet peeve I have about vampire movies. Because it always seems when a vampire movie wants to be new and modern and hip, that's always the thing they fuck with.
Yeah. That's one of the first things to go.
And then you have Bram Stoker's Dracula. That movie is so inconsistent with it that the brides can't bear to look at it, but they can melt it with their minds. And Dracula can just look at it and set it on fire.
Yeah, but I mean, in like the Hammer horror stuff, it was a case of, oh, you can just make the cross sign out of anything.
That is an amazing moment in horror of Dracula, by the way, where he just makes the two candlesticks and pushes them into the sunlight. That is awesome.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's pretty badass. And that was
Peter Cushing
Peter Cushing, wasn't it? Yeah,
that is actually one of my favorite Dracula movies.
Yeah, but it just always annoyed me that, oh, just make the cross with your fingers and you can keep Dracula.
It's like what they say in From Dusk Till Dawn, where he's like, yeah, we could put two sticks together. Peter Cushing always did that. And then Harvey Keitel just is like, Tom Savini says that, and then Harvey Keitel is just like, does anybody know anything about vampires? It wasn't from some movie. That movie's awesome.
Yeah.
This script could have used some George Clooney.
Yeah.
But we have that, and then
Definitely.
and then you see his beast form, which they don't describe until later. And he, clings to the ceiling, and then she, sees him, making faces and stuff when she wakes up, and I went, did he steal that from Underworld when she smells Michael and, jumps onto the ceiling? Was
the exact
which is
same.
another look at my hot wife movie. Serious.
Yes. And that scene in Underworld is ridiculous, but it's pretty much exactly the same here. He literally he jumps out of his skin, so afraid of this crucifix that doesn't really seem to matter later on, that he just sticks to
Dracula
the roof.
Is a pussy. Which, so we get that, and she knows he's a monster, and there's a lot of wandering around through the castle, I think.
Yeah, again, stuff happens, There's a very little connecting plot.
And I forgot about this. It ends up as the next day, and Simon's at the river, and more Turks show up for this is actually the third time they show up because I forgot about the chapel scene where Dracula kills a couple.
Oh no, that's what happens. Basically Orica gets really claustrophobic about the castle.
Yeah, and Dracula's wives start killing all the knights. They start killing random knights.
Because he just says, go and do whatever you want.
And so and that's the next morning they're looking for the missing knights because the bodies have been dumped down the well. A little bit of color out of space there for you. Which, holy crap, is anyone going to get that reference? Maybe when the Richard Stanley movie comes out, if it comes out. But yeah, so he's washing. He's looking around the river, and Orca shows up, and then Turks show up, and out of nowhere he brings out the chain whip. Yeah,
the chain whip just starts, and it's a really badly described fight scene because it's very vague,
and it's not even made out to be special in any way. It's just a chain whip, and it doesn't get special at all.
No, it doesn't get any kind of special mention. It doesn't do anything specifically, Simon Belmont-like. It's just something he suddenly has now.
All right. And then, after that, I think they go back to the castle. And this is when they finally start figuring out that something to do with vampires.
Yeah.
Which is just, wow.
Yeah, because Christopher attacks the dog.
drinks it of blood.
Yeah. Because apparently this dog is something special to Simon, even though it doesn't really appear that much.
Yes, and then this is where they go, I believe this is where they go searching around the castle. And they search it in about 5 minutes. Moment. And then they find him in a room clinging to the ceiling, and then he dies really quickly and anticlimactically.
Yeah, is that the fight scene?
They have a little bit of a fight scene in the room, but he actually takes control of himself again, and then throws himself onto the blade.
Yeah, essentially he just jumps onto a sword.
And then they bury him. And the way Simon is described, shoving the sword into the ground, I could just think of the crossed gravestones from Evil Dead. But
yes.
Okay, I actually won't spoil the joke from Ash vs. Evil Dead if you haven't seen it.
Oh, I've seen it,
So luckily Christopher was not Jewish.
Yeah.
So I'm like, is that an intentional Evil Dead reference, I wonder?
I wouldn't give him that much credit.
No, I don't think he's seen Evil Dead. He's probably only seen Army of Darkness. No. Which is actually my favorite. But yeah, it's such an anticlimax, but we'll get back to it.
Yeah.
And Dracula ends up killing off his 3 wives for trying to kill Orica.
Yeah, he just casually kills them all. So they were completely
pointless. Now, I did kind of like the idea that they were like replacement goldfish for his wife. How they were like, they kind of looked like her a little bit, so he kept them around, but now he doesn't give a shit anymore because they're not her.
I guess, but it's still very flimsy.
I do kind of like that a little bit, but it's not much. But he offs them, so they were completely pointless. And I remember thinking that their deaths in the script were really over the top.
Yeah, they are really specifically detailed.
Alright, and it's after this where he starts talking to Orica again, and we get the rest of his backstory, where he goes into the mountains to learn the powers of black magic, and he finds druids and a stone circle in Romania. That does not make sense.
Yeah, why couldn't it have been something actually Romanian?
Like, say, the Sholomons.
Yeah.
Druids were never in Romania. Even the Celtic tribes on the continent of Europe were not in Romania, as far as I know. Yeah. And there were no stone circles in Romania. Those were all Western Europe, pretty much.
Yeah, that's a big thing about, ancient Western culture.
And the stone circles and the biggest concentration of them are in the British Isles. And they weren't actually connected to the Druids, which he would know. They're only connected to the modern Druids, which is...
Yeah. Well, they kind of appropriated them.
Which, yes. But no, there's a stone circle and Druids in 1400s Romania. Bullshit.
Yeah, I just found it funny that he goes there, he finds this, and his first reaction is, what the fuck? It's not that, rather. He's not surprised at all to find it.
Oh, shit. Yeah. Now, I do kind of like the idea that he built up the castle around his, the source of his power, but that's a small idea in the grander scheme of this script.
Yeah, and it's not really anything big, really. It's just there.
And it's just like, okay, then he never really gets revenge on them. He just apparently sat on his ass in the... Alright, so Dracula's revealing his bullshit about the Druids, and then Simon runs in and fights Dracula with the chain whip, which, this scene's actually kind of cool.
For the most part,
if we did Simon Belmont fighting Dracula with a chain whip, it's not precisely Castlevania, but it's not too bad.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
But, because it only shows up and is downplayed in these two scenes, I described it as, this is like the actual Resident Evil characters in Anderson's Resident Evil films.
Yes, it did feel like that. It was just token effort towards the source material.
Although I've heard, and I don't want to give them too much credit, that the only reason they started adding characters is because the studio went, well, the fans were upset about there being no characters, so you have to add some in.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which, goddamn, I wish James Purefoy had gotten used better in that first movie.
Yeah.
He could have been Wesker. Alright, so we have, this fight scene, and then Dracula flees to his... He flees to his lair, which now I remember reading a complaint about this, which I don't really think is that big of a deal, but they complained that his lair was deep in the bowels of the castle instead of being at the highest parapet like it is in the games.
Yeah, that's a pretty minor complaint considering the rest
I don't
of it.
really mind it that much because once again, Dracula having his lair way up on a tower with a window in it doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyways.
Yeah, it makes more sense for it to be underground, honestly.
No,
I mean, if it was in a tower, it makes sense for a game, but for a movie, it doesn't make sense. So I'm
more of a fan of Dracula having to get into his lair by crawling down the wall, into the window, through a door, down a staircase, and into the chapel where his tomb is, which I like that in the book. It's almost Bond villain-esque. But it was awesome. I wish that scene could have been done in a movie, because they've kind of sort of done it a few times, but the closest we got was a deleted scene from Coppola's Dracula.
Yeah, and it was kind of goofy.
Where he pops out of the coffin and goes, ah. Which they remember doing that part in the final cut. And then, the characters finally start to figure out how to fight a vampire. And this part, I actually kind of like this part a little bit, because Voss figures out what vampires are weak to just by using basic logical deductions, instead of relying on a Van Helsing type character showing up and explaining everything to it.
Yeah, they actually do figure it out on their own, which is something that doesn't usually happen.
That's one of 2 or 3 positive points we've given to Anderson so far.
Yeah.
And then they finally start describing his beast form, and it just seems really anticlimactic because there's that big mystery about it at first. And he's basically described as being part man, part bat, and part wolf. So he's Man Bear Pig's cousin, Man Bat Wolf. And once again, something that was lifted from Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, all I could see was the Coppola
The big
version.
green bat, which I actually thought that scene was kind of cool in the movie itself, but then I saw the behind-the-scenes footage of Gary Oldman going, but Francis, how am I supposed to get in character as a big giant Batman? That's really funny. But it's like he's laying in the coffin, and he literally is, Man Bear Pig's cousin, Man Bat Wolf.
Yeah. It's not really
gonna pop out
described.
at the portal to Imagination Land and attack Paul Anderson. And
But, I mean, that kind of concept could have worked if you have... Like, I mean, it's a very bare-bones description, so I think effects-wise, if you've got a good, you know, someone in charge of effects, it could work.
No, not at all.
No.
Even in Mortal Kombat, where they did keep the CGI to a relative minimum, it wasn't that good. And I'm trying to remember any big effects shots from Event Horizon.
Oh, well, the actual ship itself is pretty good. Yeah, I mean, that's all done with miniatures as well.
And then
it's really well done.
The engine in the middle of it, which shows up at the end of Silent Hill 4.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? A weird spinning orb
with spikes on it.
So weird.
And then, alright, so we have that, and then they figure out that the chessboard is what was controlling the booby traps all along, and they figure out that it opens up the big dragon mosaic in the floor, and that's what leads down to Dracula's lair. And then the zombie villagers start attacking the castle while Simon's heading down there to get Orica. And so...
Yeah, for some reason they choose that's the right point to start attacking.
And
I don't know why.
Then there's this big Helm's Deep moment with Velas leading the other knights, whom I really wasn't sure how many were left.
Yeah, because there's only other 2 named knights, so it makes it seem like it's just 3 guys fighting all these villages.
And so we have that, and so it's cutting out with them fighting, and with them fighting what am I thinking? The zombie villagers, which they insist on referring to as undead familiars, whatever the hell that is. And so Simon basically goes down and he's fighting it, and Orica is sort of being controlled by Dracula.
Yeah, again, it's very vague.
It's confirmed that in the center of that stupid stone circle, which shouldn't be there, that's where Dracula is immune to crosses and stuff. Conveniently. So there's an area they have to keep away from during the fight.
Yeah, and then it's made a big deal about how the circle protects him from the cross. And then he just kind of forgets and walks out and then gets, burned by the cross.
And Orica, being stupid, says, "No, Simon, spare Dracula," which is stupid. And then this is the part which just went, it's the beginning of the parts of this ending, is that Christopher shows up because apparently you have to leave the stake in for the vampire to stay dead.
Yeah, that's kind of a... It's like Vampire the Masquerade almost.
It's in that. I know it from because the first place I ever saw it, and even when I was a little kid, I'm like, well, that's complete bullshit. Was in House of Frankenstein, where Dracula gets resurrected because Boris Karloff pulls the stake out of the skeleton, which looks like he pulled it from an anatomy class.
Yeah, it's very flimsy justification.
And it never made any sense to me. And the fact that they use it here in a really throwaway manner just thinks, wow, Anderson, you're pulling vampire stuff from everywhere. Yeah,
and it's for Christopher, who's completely nothing. There's no reason for him to bring him back other than to have a little extra in the fight scene,
And then, oh boy, Simon manages to stab Dracula, but doesn't quite get him through the heart completely. Dracula kills him, basically, and then Orica steps in, and then drives the sword even deeper through his heart and kills him, and it's treated like a huge romantic gesture, and that it's like Dracula somehow redeems himself.
Yeah, it's weird. It's written like it's some kind of heartfelt euthanasia.
Yes, and it's just, and the fact that Simon doesn't get to kill Dracula, and basically he dies, and the entire Belmont line is now dead, just feels like the biggest fuck you to Castlevania possible.
Yep, and Mila Jovovich gets to be the hero again.
And it feels like that Anderson just has a complete and utter contempt towards Castlevania, which is just like, wow, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's just so stupid. I was really mad when I read that too. It's just like, why would you do that?
Yeah, again, it's almost deliberate in its, inaccuracy.
Yes, and then it gets even worse because Simon. Not only did he not manage to kill Dracula, but he was too late. So Orica is now a vampire and the Lord of Castlevania.
Did we establish that she was bitten by Dracula?
Yeah, because I think she was bitten right before Simon jumped in with the whip. So he was too late, so his sacrifice was completely pointless.
What I found was really hilarious in the script was you've got Vlas fighting the familiars, and they they run away when Dracula dies.
And then they come right
but they
back.
come back, and it's revealed that Ulrica's a vampire, and it's in the script. It feels like such a big dun 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 moment, you know.
And you know what? Because I kept picturing Vlas as being Colin Salmon. I kept waiting for them to like rip him into 4 pieces because we know Paul W.S. Anderson loves to dice him.
Yeah, quick, get the cheese wire.
Like, I just kept waiting for that to happen, and then it doesn't. And then, so Simon was completely pointless, and then it gets even worse.
Ulrika makes a point of saying she'll wait for him.
Well, okay, that's the big question I have about this ending is, who is she waiting for? Is she waiting for Simon, or is she waiting for Dracula? Because her big romantic moment was with Dracula.
Yeah, well, I would say she's waiting for Simon because she says it to him.
Oh, that's right. And that's why Vlas becomes a vampire, so we can wait for his son.
Yeah, well, his
surrogate son. And then, holy shit, they cut straight forward to modern times.
Modern times, skyscraper New York.
Before that, though, the castle is now a tourist attraction.
Oh, yeah.
God. I was just imagining it as being like Lord Farquaad's castle.
Yeah, it really is just really cheesy.
From Shrek, complete with the little figures singing.
Yeah, it would be. I did actually imagine it. It's like that kind of attraction where the tourists walk through and you just have like cardboard cutouts.
Yes, exactly like that. It's just, ugh.
Yeah.
That's what's happened to Castlevania. And then you find out that Ulrika and Vlas have like this corporation which is in the big skyscraper, which is the new modern castle.
Yeah, they say the skyscraper is looking castle, and Vlas's suit is the modern armor of the soldier.
Oh, it's the businessman of the warrior businessman or something. Which is just like, okay, so Vlas became a vampire, even though it's established vampires are a bad thing. And it's...
Yes. He became a vampire, and then he became... it's not really established what they do, either. So he could be a lawyer, he's a businessman.
I don't know.
What do they do?
And you know what?
Exactly.
It just struck me just now. You know what this ending is? It's the ending to Hellraiser 3. With the box building.
Yeah, it kind of is, actually. That stupid kind of... That reveal,
Only this is even dumber.
Yeah.
So you get to this ending, and it's just like, okay, so the sequel is set up for Mila Jovovich to be the main character.
Yeah, and she's the uber superpowered badass
and it wouldn't
again.
surprise me because they were very vague about how many Resident Evil movies they were going to do at this point. Because I could have sworn that they were like, oh, Extinction might be the last one, and then they were like, oh, we'll probably do Afterlife might probably be the last one. I swear they've said it at least 2 or 3 times that the next Resident Evil is going to be the last one.
Yeah, pretty much.
But they all ended with sequel hooks. But basically what happened to this movie is that they were trying to get the script finished and start filming before the writer's strike. And Paul W.S. Anderson was actually, I believe he was in either Hungary or the Czech Republic or somewhere doing location scouting. And he said in an interview, and this was so hilarious because if I were like the member of that country's tourism board, I would be so pissed. He said, it's like, there are places we found. It's like Mordor was a real place. Which, I'm like, okay, no place on Earth is as shitty as Mordor is.
What? Like, he basically just said, you know that horribly barren ashen land where nothing grows and nothing thrives? That's Romania.
Which, although they have let themselves look really bad on film.
Oh yeah, with like, Hellraiser, was it? Hellraiser
Deader,
7.
And the Prophecy sequels.
Prophecy films.
Which, actually, from what I gathered from your review, Prophecy 4 is more historically accurate than this is.
Oh yeah, it is surprisingly so.
Now I'm just imagining Sean Pertwee as a vampire in Romania.
That'd actually be kind of... do that. I think he's a great actor, so...
I like that he's actually one of the things I liked the most about Gotham when I was watching it.
Yeah, he's really good in Gotham, apparently. I haven't seen it myself, but I'm told that he's one of the biggest things about it.
I got a little bit over halfway through the season, and I was like, this started off pretty good, but now it's just like, blah. It plateaued. Yeah. It plateaued mediocre.
Well, whenever I see Gotham advertised, I just say, you got rid of Constantine for that?
Oh no, that got a second season before Constantine was even on the air. Because Constantine had that weird late season that it did. Which that probably hurt it more than anything.
It just feels so... It just annoys me that Constantine got the axe, whereas Gotham continued.
I wish... if Constantine had gotten the full season, I might be more forgiving. But,
yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, but this is like... But yeah, basically... eventually Paul Anderson I think he just got tired of trying to figure things out and just went, well, I'm going to do Death Race. And the project got handed over to this guy called Sylvain White, whom the thing he's best known for doing is Stomp the Yard, but I haven't seen it. And I've only vaguely heard the name and I saw it on his IMDb page, but he apparently was a Castlevania fan, and his script might have been closer. I'm not really sure what his script was, though, because I don't think it's leaked.
Right.
And then eventually I think the writer's strike got in the way, and so his project got killed off. But
yeah, I hear a lot of promising projects got killed because of the strike.
Well, a lot of things happened because of the strike, like Season 4 of The Office got kind of trimmed down.
Yeah, there was a lot of problems.
There's that. Quantum of Solace was a victim of it. A lot of things were Transformers 2 has blamed the writer's strike.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem with that.
But what else was there? But there was that, and there was also around the same time. But about this project, when he was doing press interviews for Resident Evil Retribution, Paul Anderson said, "Well, I'd still like to do it."
Oh dear.
So he seems like the most likely candidate. But the other, but there was weird because at the same time as this project was kind of being developed, there was an animated movie that was being worked on. There were like character art and stuff, and it was being written by Warren Ellis, the comic book writer.
Which sounds
yes,
really
from what I know of
interesting.
his writing, it sounds really interesting. And it was supposed to be a trilogy, and at least the first one would have been based on Castlevania 3, which is the prequel.
Yeah. That makes
that has the most
sense,
story to it from what I've read. But there was that. But then that fell under, and I haven't really been able to find a reason why. They just kind of stopped talking about it. And really, the only thing I know about the script is that Warren Ellis revealed that it began with two Transylvanian peasants joking about fucking a goat.
Yeah.
Which that apparently pissed off Castlevania fans to no end. And apparently they were upset that the character art for the thing looked different from the characters in the game, and apparently Grant Dynasty, the Spider-Man pirate guy, got left out.
Yeah, I don't know why they were concerned about it looking different, because you can't really make an animated film in like whatever bit the game was. I can't remember.
I think it was an NES, so it would have been 8-bit, I think.
Was it
16-bit, I thought was SNES.
It might have been 16-bit, I think. Yeah, but I can't remember.
I don't really know for sure. But there was that. But apparently the animation idea is getting resurrected because Adi Shankar, who was an executive producer on Dread, and he's been the whole guy behind the whole bootleg universe thing with Punisher Dirty Laundry, which was really cool, and I liked the Venom one, and Power Rangers is probably the most notorious, which was
well he's really good at making things at least
but
very
the other ones were there was a James Bond one which I thought was kind of funny. Which
really
the idea of the James Bond was that's what if Sean Connery's Bond got old, and he's in a world he doesn't really understand. There's a scene where he's like hitting on a woman in a bar, and then she and he thinks he's doing really well, and then she says that she costs a certain amount of money, and then his inner narration is like filthy harlot. And there was also the last thing that they did, which was actually like it happened before a couple of them, but it was they did a little animated web series about Judge Death, which was actually pretty good. Like it had really cheap animation, but it was pretty good.
Yes, I did hear about it. I never got around to seeing it, but it was it looked
it wasn't that bad, surprisingly. Consider
it was very motion comic style,
wasn't
it?
Not animated heavily. But yeah, that's interesting. But apparently they're working on an animated Castlevania series, which is being done in like an anime style. And apparently Warren Ellis is writing this too, so I'm guessing they're using elements of his older scripts. If it ever comes out, it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I personally am one of these people who thinks Warren Ellis is one of the best writers around. So it sounds interesting because I like his work, and I think if anyone can write it, he definitely
I'd be
can.
interested in. I haven't read any of his work yet. The first thing I'll probably get to is whenever I get around, because I'm slowly making my way through the new editions of Hellblazer. So I'll eventually get to his run on that. But all I can think of is Garth Ennis Transylvania, starring Cassidy from Preacher. You bloody wanker, Dracula. But to give an idea of how I would do like a Castlevania trilogy, do a first movie which kind of broadly follows Castlevania 3 as the prequel, and maybe give a little cameo role to Sonia Belmont, who was the female Belmont who got written out of continuity. and make her like Trevor Belmont's mother and have her send him to Castlevania to take down Dracula, and you have that whole story. And then the middle movie could be anything really. It could be a Simon Belmont story. It could be like Symphony of the Night.
Well, what I think is interesting about the whole Castlevania thing is that it's almost designed to be sequelized, you know? So the fact that they couldn't make it into something decent just shows how bad of a writer Anderson is, really.
Now, my idea for the third movie, and this is something that could go very, very wrong if it wasn't handled properly. But the idea is that at the end of the second movie, instead of properly killing Dracula, whoever the hero is just so completely drains him of his power that the castle basically falls into just a ruin. And he's like an old man, he's not very powerful anymore, and that leads into the situation he's in at the beginning of Stoker's novel. And so the third movie would be, you're seeing like another interpretation of Stoker's novel, but you're seeing stuff going on behind the scenes with whoever it was, how he sealed away Dracula's power. Now Dracula's in London trying to figure out how to get it back. And then eventually you find out that the reason why his death is a little anticlimactic in the original novel is because there was a Belmont or whoever waiting in the shadows who steps out and finishes it for real.
Yeah, I can see that.
But you see, my conflict with that is trying to not make the characters from the novels seem any lesser.
Yeah, the problem would be balancing the novel's story and Castlevania.
But it's something that you need to be very careful with. But I'm just in love with this idea now. And of course, Mads Mikkelsen would play Dracula.
I mean, yeah. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and of course it makes more sense than the way they tried to connect the games to the novel, which is that Quincy Morris just randomly has a son, and he's descended from the Belmonts, and he knows all about Dracula, even though he's just some Texan dude.
Yeah.
He was a Texan dude with a big knife.
Yeah, still makes sense than this, more sense than this script.
Most things make more sense than this script. But god damn that ending. Like, it wasn't good before that, but that just made it worse.
It really did. That was the last straw.
Yeah, so it was just like, okay, this isn't very good, but it could still be kind of okay. And what's completely bullshit about is that the people who were talking, I guess the PR people were saying that it was supposed to be a Dracula origin and the origin of the feud between Dracula and the Belmonts. There is no feud here because Belmont fucking dies without any kids.
Yeah, that's
so Orica, I guess, takes on the name Belmont or some stupid shit like that.
I could definitely see that being a thing.
Damn you, Anderson. Orica Jovovich Anderson.
Yes. But yeah, again, it's very difficult to not see this as just another Mila Jovovich vehicle.
Well, I can tell you one Mila Jovovich film this would have been better than. Ultraviolet.
Which? Oh yeah.
Because this movie couldn't be as visually off-putting as Ultraviolet. This would not have had the massive biohazard, radioactive sign, room, ow, my eyes hurt.
That film is literally a clusterfuck to the eyes.
Damn you, Kurt Vibber.
God almighty. It's dreadful. Everything about that was just
That's another
awful.
vampire movie, sort of.
Technically, but
apparently the studio made them cut out the explicit vampire references. So yeah, I think we've covered this.
Yeah.
I mean, unless there's anything we could possibly add to this clusterfuck of a script.
No, I think we pretty much went through
Dracula,
it quite thoroughly.
That sums this script up right there. Alici, really apostrophe,
Yeah, and I couldn't help just reading that as Dracul.
Yes, same. Or Dracul,
It's just, there's just a strange pause in the middle of the name.
Like, we aren't sure if we want to call him Dracula, but we will. Eventually.
Yeah. Well, the other go-to name is calling him Alucard.
No, please not. That's unless you're doing a Symphony of the Night movie, just leave the name Alucard out of it. Because it's played.
Yeah. And people think they're being so clever with it as well. Oh, it's Dracula backwards, don't be so clever.
That was old after the first time it was used. In Son of Dracula, really where Lon Chaney Jr. was the most American Dracula possible.
Yeah.
Honestly, that movie's not that bad, all things considered. I think they were pushing it when Hammer randomly shoved it in 1972 with Johnny Alucard.
Jesus.
You've seen that one, haven't you?
I know about it, and I've seen like.
It's
little
honestly
clips
not
of
that
it.
bad of a watch because it embraces the 70s cheese.
Oh.
So it's honestly kind of fun. But
So it almost sounds like it was verging into like Blackula.
well, not quite blaxploitation, but
No, but it's that.
but I
kind
mean,
of
whenever
vibe.
Dracula's in it, there's still a gothic feel to it because his layers in this
Yeah.
unconsecrated church or whatever the hell it was. No,
Yeah.
the really bad 70s Hammer Dracula was Satanic Rites, which is like a
Oh,
made-for-TV crime thriller starring Dracula in a bit role. Like, it could easily have been... It looks like it could have been a Starsky and Hutch episode.
Right.
What's a 70s British cop show? I don't know.
I can't quite recall.
Oh,
I wasn't born then.
Fuck it. My British TV knowledge generally tends to be like, okay, you got Quatermass in the late 50s, early 60s. Then I'm kind of sort of familiar with Doctor Who, and then Red Dwarf.
Oh yeah. But we had stuff like Tales of the Unexpected, which was like it was kind of like a Tales from the Crypt kind of thing.
Figure.
But it was Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl's Tales of the Unexpected.
Did they adapt his story where the wife kills her husband with the leg like a lamb?
I would not be surprised.
Because that was a really good
actually.
short story.
Yeah, it basically it was all those really sort of
because
creepy stories.
Have you read that one? She kills her abusive cop husband with like a lamb, and then she puts it in the oven, starts cooking it, and then she calls up the other cops. Of course, they don't suspect her, and so she ends up feeding them the lamb.
I guess that's kind of
that is actually a really clever story. I'm like, holy shit, this guy wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
But then again, I've always found Roald Dahl pretty creepy.
And he also wrote You Only Live Twice, where Sean Connery turns Asian.
Wow. Oh, God. Yeah.
I think we can leave it there. Sean Connery is Asian Dracula.
Yes, I think that's...
So, alright, final thoughts?
Anderson sucks as a writer.
And the script sucks as a result. So that was episode 8, I believe, and until next time, guys, bye.
Bye.